Hello and welcome to the season finale of our epic X-Men reread presented by Crushing Comics. I'm your host, Crisis with a K, and I'm here with two friends, and we are enjoying a read of Claremont's X-Men from Giant Size X-Men in issue 94 all the way through issue 137, which is what we are talking about today. Tyler and I have read these before, but for Fariha, it is the first time, and we dearly hope that she survives the experience. Now, this is definitely going to be a retrospective of our entire time reading all these issues as we talk about this big season one finale of issue 137. So we're going to talk about things that have led up to this. We're going to talk about ramifications of this. It's going to involve spoilers. In fact, we're probably going to talk a little bit about House of X and Powers of X, and maybe even hint at some of the status quo that comes after, although we will do our very best not to spoil any stories after House of X and Powers of X unless we can tell you explicitly that we're about to say something. So just go into it with all of those as warnings. Hello, my friends.
Hi.
Hello. I'm so excited.
I'm really excited too.
We kind of gotten on this journey, and I'm like, oh my god, I am now like a Claremont sort of expert.
And I feel like we've been hyping this moment to you for so long, so I'm so interested to see what you thought about it.
Right, like, and then this is like not even just you. Fox also have been hyping this up for me for like last 20 years.
They keep trying
they cannot stop making this storyline. So yeah.
Oh, that's something we should definitely talk about, is kind of like the expectation versus reality of all the adaptations of Dark Phoenix. But before we get into any of that, I do have a little intro chat for us to warm up today, although we seem pretty warmed up already, which is finales, ends of things, right? So this is kind of our finale of this initial season of our Epic X-Men reread. It's very much kind of the finale, sort of the initial Claremont and Byrne run, although Byrne runs for a few more issues. So I thought we could talk about what are some of our favorite endings without fully spoiling them, more talking about kind of how we felt about favorite endings. Tyler, do you have a show or a book or a series or something that had a favorite ending for you?
Since we are at the season finale and not the series finale, I'm going to talk about, but I'm just going to mention like two season finale, which I thought was like really, really good. One would be Fringe season finale 1, where they reveal the whole concept of the show, like the first reveal, and the second one would be the first season. I think it's season 1 finale of Persons of Interest, which introduced Groot.
I like
so these are the two that sort of stuck in my mind quite a bit in terms of season finale, especially season 1 finale.
Yeah. Especially with Fringe, because I know that show and I've watched it. Isn't it interesting when a show kind of, it's hard to explain. It gives you everything that it's about and it never lies, but then it takes until the finale of that sequence of things to kind of tie all the stuff together. And then you have that click moment, as opposed to things. I think it's kind of cheap when something goes, and that wasn't even really the story, which I think is kind of almost contemporaneous to Fringe with stuff like Lost, where they're like, now everything is different than you thought it was. Whereas Fringe kind of, even though every season of Fringe changed, it felt like it was very organically like, let me give you the one piece you were missing to understand this picture that you were seeing. That was a very Fringe kind of way of doing things.
Fringe is like one TV show. I'm like, I want it to be a book. Like
it would be fun as a book.
Yeah, like, there could be so many other things that can be explained or side things and stuff like that. Yeah. So yeah, I'm still like haven't watched the last 2 seasons though, but that's.
But Fringe, such as it is, it's almost easy to just like watch a season and kind of like put it away because they're all such a distinct thing. Yeah. So what about you, Fariha? Yeah. Do you have fond memories of a season or series finale?
So I wanted to initially talk about a series finale, but since Tyler said season, I would say Good Place season 1.
Which we have mentioned before.
Yeah, we have mentioned before, because that was like, even though you're like, I had the suspicion that that's what they're going and that's what it was. And I was like, oh, I knew it. So it was like a very satisfying that way. And then I was like, very excited about it. So, and then also it was before, like, I was actually watching it as it was coming out. So I'm like, oh no, now I have to wait for season 2. Why am I celebrating? So yeah, it kind of brings back that fond memory.
I was really thinking about kind of the difference between season and series finales. The first thing I remember really ending as a series that I really remember seeing was Cheers, because I was probably in like middle school and it was something that I would watch every week. And I remember trying to stay up for it, and there was all this expectation. It was one of like the highest rated series finales or television programs of all time at that time, and kind of understanding the sense from the adults around me who had been watching it, since the the original years of Shelley Long, that like it was kind of almost impossible to fulfill all of their expectations. Like everybody wanted something, and a series finale can only do so much, right? There's always going to be somebody who's disappointed. So that was kind of my introduction to that. Like I remember getting to school the next day, and I was like that kid who at lunch the teachers would talk to about stuff while all the other kids played. And I'd be like, so what did you think about the Cheers finale? And like kind of understanding that weight of expectation, which I think I've always kind of clung to and kind of wrestled with over time. Then I think about something like the X-Files, right? Which you two might have done. Did you watch the X-Files live when it was on television?
Not me.
It wasn't. It was dubbed 2 years later.
Oh.
Like 2 seasons
How was the
behind.
dubbed X-Files?
Oh, it was awkward. Like it was really awkward, because there was a lot of like flirting that would be mistranslated. It's not good. Like in later life, I realized that they were flirting.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not.
Plus, X-Files had a lot of puns, like verbal puns on language and things that I have to wonder. I've never tried watching it in French. I should try sometimes to see if it like works at all in another language.
No, it didn't. It was just like an alien shoot 'em up. That's all it was.
But I think of that in terms of finales, because I think that's when I graduated to having like my own set of expectations every season, and like how X-Files always tried to do this big shock every season. X-Files was not one, like Tyler said, that would try to like recontextualize it for you. X-Files was always trying to like totally break you at the end of the season and change everything.
TV was back then, because it's like you have to shock people, right?
So that you come back and watch the next season.
Yeah, like I know. I mean, now I think we are smarter as viewers, so you can't grab us anymore.
Yeah.
We're on to you, writers.
Well, we're going to move on into our discussion of Uncanny X-Men 37. And we ended the last issue, speaking of shocking cliffhangers, the X-Men just disappeared. Like, what the heck? Jean seemingly was cured. They were at her parents' house and they just blipped. And it turns out that they were teleported onto the bridge of a Shi'ar ship who has come to fetch them in Earth's orbit because of all of the destruction that Phoenix has wrought. And this is basically Lilandra, despite her wanting to have allegiance to Xavier, despite her wanting to have allegiance to the X-Men, who she's grown to love, realizes that as the Empress, it is her job to hold the Phoenix to account. Fariha, what did you think about that as the development that kind of spurs on this climax to the Dark Phoenix saga?
I was a little underwhelmed how easily Phoenix was defeated in air code in the issue before. It's like, oh my God, we can't take care of it. Oh, it's okay, we're taking care of her. And like, okay, like, So I mean, it does make sense because, this is like the only intergalactic authority we have seen so far. So that has been set up. And then, Phoenix did killed 5 billion people or beings. So someone has to hold her responsible. And as the only, it kind of makes sense, story-wise that, the X-Men put her on the throne and now she's going to be the authority. I just do want to say that this is the corniest thing, and that is like such a stereotype, but I always love it when like the issue opens with all the people are showing up in the same screen. Everyone has something to say. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know whether it's a Marvel thing. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen. I haven't read a lot of DC team books, but the thing is, like every time there's a team, like they're always like someone has saying something, and I'm like, ugh. But it always brings me joy because can you imagine like in real life you'll do that, you'll just stuck in one pose and then everyone say their piece. That's just so awkward.
Yeah, well, everybody's like.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I was like, it's okay.
It's very an illusion of comics, right? Like in reality, all those people are shifting and whatever, and they're all kind of like looking around. But in comics, you just get this appearance that they're all standing in freeze frame and like, what do you think? Yeah. I don't know. Where are we?
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like very Scooby-Doo, where they're like,
exactly. So it always brings me joy, especially Professor X is like on like Rasputin's Colossus's lab. It's like, oh my god. So anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Tyler, what have you always thought about this setup, that it's Lilandra ultimately who creates the climax for us artificially by putting the Phoenix on trial?
I mean, this is the first X-Men story I've ever read, and it is the second comic story I've ever read. So to me, it was like, oh man, this is huge. And like, I don't know, like at that time when I first read it, like, how the Shi'ar is, you know, in the greater cosmic environment of Marvel. I did not know that it was a purely X-Men thing, and that the Shi'ar has, you know, will I mean, eventually they will play a bigger role in the whole tapestry of like Marvel universe, but at this point in time, I think they don't appear elsewhere except X-Men. Yeah. So
I did not know that.
Yeah. So for me, I thought, like, you know, this is big. And I mean, you know, when I first read it, I did not know where it is going. So I was like, oh, okay, what is happening? And then of course, like, who is that ball guy, you know, that appears on page 1? Like, you know, I was like, at that time I was like, oh, okay. Wow, there's a lot of...
the Watcher does not make any sense to you if you've never read Marvel Comics.
Specifically,
he's a very like Fantastic Four kind of phenomenon at this point in time. So if you haven't read it, like, you're like, who is this giant toddler in a dress? What is the...
And then later on,
it does look like Professor X though.
Right, like, are they related?
It's because of the baldness.
No, but
Watcher has different eyebrows though.
Yeah, and his head is like, you know, it's like a bobblehead. And then I mean, later on, so later on I realized that, like, this is another shorthand that Claremont sometimes use, that something huge has happened,
right?
And not just Claremont. I think a lot of the Marvel writers will do that, like, your two is here to watch this event unfold, so something major is supposed to happen, like, you know, at this point in time. So I thought it was I mean, for me, it was like, okay, you know, initially it's like, okay, this is just someone, park it aside, and then let's go on to the next story. I mean, go on to the last chapter. But I mean, my thoughts was like, okay, you know, someone intergalactic has to take care of this situation, and it makes sense for me in the story that this is the only intergalactic empire that we've ever met, and so Shi'ar would be natural to it. And I did not notice until several rereads later that the Kree and the Skrulls are also involved, because again, I have
they just seemed made up to me at the time. Like, I'll go into my story in a second, but I was like, oh, they made up a bunch of green aliens. Like, I didn't know that they were the established alien races of the Marvel universe. That was completely lost on me. Well, you know, much like Tyler, this was at the time not the first X-Men story I had read, but certainly the earliest. And I had been maybe reading for like a year at this point from when Claremont departs. So I had missed the Lilandra stuff that had happened just prior in like 275. So I maybe had an inkling of who she was, but this was my first exposure to her. I hadn't seen her whole romance and everything with Xavier. And I thought she was like badass. I was like, here's this woman who's apparently the queen of the galaxy. She's got this cool metal headdress and she's all in this metal armor. And even though she's clearly very compassionate and has a relationship with these people, she's like, I'm still going to put you to death. Like, I think this is why I really like her. I know that a lot of people kind of eye roll at her or don't really love all the Shi'ar plots, but I just have a long time love of Shi'ar plots. I think because this was my intro and they're really cool here. But then also the same thing as Tyler, like, I just thought the Kree Supreme Intelligence and the Skrull Queen were completely fabricated in that moment, when in reality, these two emissaries of theirs that are there to keep watch become a major story element that come back again and again. And we're just referencing Empire, actually. So it's a thing. So we get past this initial moment, and she's basically just ready to sentence the X-Men to death, like right then and there. And Xavier's like, no, we challenge you to a challenge. And so they have to, they kind of all become aware of what he's challenged them to, and they kind of all go off to prepare. And we have this very interesting sequence of kind of 1 page and half page shots of all of them and the things that they're contemplating. Now, I've, taken notes on all of them, and some of them stick out to me more than others. Tyler, is there one more than others for you that really stuck out?
I mean, for me, I think the there is this purity from Colossus.
Yeah.
He doesn't even think about he doesn't even have the thought that, okay, maybe we shouldn't defend her. He's like, she's a friend, I'm going to help her. End of story. And that sort of stuck out really differently from several of the other characters who are slightly older and slightly more mature and kind of understand the complexity of the issue, the situation. Whereas Colossus, being the youngest one here at this point in time, he's like, oh yeah, she's a friend, I'm gonna help her. So I thought I thought this is the part where I thought Claremont shines. And he really delves into each character and talk about it. And in some ways he choreographed the ending with these small snippets, small scenes here. Yeah, the gravity of the situation is sort of kind of becoming clear to us right now.
What about you, Fariha? Is there one of these solo sequences that stuck out more than others to you?
I think I'm going to talk about the sequences, but the thing is that initially the one that really made me laugh, because we kind of talked about it, is that Professor Xavier still continuing to make decisions for them without asking them.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, we're going to challenge you to a fight. It's we didn't ask for that. I think Beast talks about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of the different sequence, I think the one that kind of stuck out to me is Nightcrawlers, because I often forget that he's German. And then the fact that when he was in circus, it makes sense. There will be people who have survived concentration camp to be now integrated back into normal life, and he met them. And I think there was that he was talking about that. How can I be mad at those people, but then be okay with Jean? So that was kind of the one that kind of stuck out more. And then also Wolverine with his hairy backside.
Because he was taking a shower.
I know he was taking a shower, but my God, there was so many hair in that the whole half page. I think it's more hair than in my head. And no, I mean, the thing is he was saying that. So I kind of read it last time, when I read it last time, I'm like, I know Jean more than anyone. I'm like, no, you don't, but then in retrospect, I think he's talking about Jean not being in control, and
the nature of Jean.
The nature, exactly. And then I think that kind of stuck a little bit. It's oh, okay, we're seeing these aspects of it, which at that time we don't know this Wolverine, this side of Wolverine. So it's being planted over here. So those are the two.
And also, I think this is the first panel of him meditating.
Oh, he's meditating?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, I was just too taken aback by all the hair you got. But yeah. And then the third thing, this is also where Beast's love for green-haired ladies started.
Right?
This is he was it was my star and garters. I always think Beast has an English accent, even though, but it's this is where it all started. I'm since then, he's always been about green-haired ladies.
In a Cheers connection, I always, even before the movie, I've always thought of Beast as having Kelsey Grammer's voice, because Kelsey Grammer has that. I think it's almost like that mid-Atlantic accent where it's so proper that it's almost imitating a British accent, which there's linguistic reasons for that. But it's this very proper way of saying all of your words, and that's exactly how I always think of Beast talking. So I do too. Yeah. I think it's really. Oh, go ahead.
Those are the things. No, I was saying those are the things that popped out to me. That is the green-haired lady made my day.
Well, I probably should have mentioned at the start, we are going to also be talking about Phoenix, the Untold Story, after we get through the actual 137. And I can't help, having now read that a few times, but have my idea of these scenes be affect a little bit about what Claremont would have written them as originally, because they're very different. And I think he does this thing here where it's a really interesting reflection on philosophy in a couple of different ways. The philosophy of morality, the philosophy of personal responsibility, the philosophy of love. And he's kind of showing how each of the X-Men kind of orient themselves. And I think you've hit some of the really interesting ones that I probably would have talked about. And the only one neither of you have mentioned so far is one of the most interesting, which is Storm. And Storm reflects that she's so unhappy, basically. She's like, this X-Men stuff is miserable, but they're my friends. And as somebody with this power, I have a greater moral duty. And then even as she's saying that she has a greater moral duty due to her power, even though she's saying she abhors the Phoenix and everything that it stands for, that her love for Jean as a beloved sister actually ranks even higher than her moral duty as someone with a power. So as usual, I think Claremont kind of gives Storm the most clarity out of everybody. Everybody's got a piece of it. Nightcrawler's talking about the morality and how it compares to the Holocaust. Colossus talking about the purity of love. Storm kind of has the whole picture here, which is, Storm can see that she's got a responsibility, but there's no greater responsibility than your responsibility to other people.
It's very interesting though. It's like, despite all of them having different thoughts and different things, I actually ended up really appreciating the fact that they all banded together for Jean at the end of it. Like, it really didn't matter where they were coming from or what they thought about the whole things and stuff. And I think that was kind of as of right now, we haven't necessarily seen it like, oh, mutants banding together because they're mutants and stuff like that. But it just kind of like a starting point. Like, you have to, like, because there's very few of us and we are kind of bonded because of who we are, and we have to stick together. Even though we don't necessarily agree with some of these things, including us being in this challenge thing.
Yeah, even Cyclops is like, oh yeah, I can understand like Lilandra's choice, like what she's doing, because he's the leader. So
as a leader.
As the leader.
Yeah. So it's like, but it was interesting. And what about the choice of like Jean choosing Marvel Girl costume?
We certainly know Hickman is a fan.
I have a question about that. Right. So the thing is, I actually, like, to that point, this is one of the status quo question that I have is that, and we're going to talk about Jean a little bit because I have some thoughts about this character, is like, it felt like this is her happiest costume. Like she always picks that as her happy, like this is when life was simpler for her, that everything was like more going, in a good direction, or like, things are just working out for her. And then that's why she kind of somehow connect herself to that costume. And I'm like, is that what it is?
I think there's certainly an element of that. I mean, she even says in that moment, she's going to return to when she was happiest. It's kind of weird to me though, because like, was she really happiest? Like in this, as the student doing these Silver Age adventures, I guess at this point she was. But if we think about like the modern day of X-Men, like, was she really the happiest now as opposed to like, I don't know, during X Factor or during the Blue and Gold era? So it's kind of like it works in this moment. But then I do think sometimes people make a misstep of thinking that Jean is always nostalgic for her teenage years when it just doesn't make sense to me anymore.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing which I was kind of like, do we buy it? That's the thing. Like, I mean, I agree with Peter that at this juncture of Jean, it certainly is, I think, plays into that whole I'm happier, I'm more carefree, at that, in that point in time compared to this, especially since she just committed genocide of like an entire population of broccoli and asparagus people.
But the thing is that the costume does change twice more. Like she changes that costume very fast.
Yeah, she changed. As a progression.
Exactly.
Well, and it's also just an authorial device from Claremont to be like, I don't want you to think of Jean as either of these phoenixes for a while. we'll come back to that. But like, I need you to have the purity of intent here of not thinking about her post 100, you know?
Potentially, yeah. But I mean, that's one of the things that is like, as of right now, and I was like, okay, what is Jean? Like, what does she want? So if she tells me, this is like one of the times that she actually said something that she was trying to do, and then I was like, yeah, girl, okay, if that frilly dress makes you happy, go wear it.
Well, I mean, this type of scenes is going to come is kind of a hallmark of X-Men, because there is another one that I remember distinctively happening, and and this is like the calm before the storm moments, which I thought was like Claremont does these scenes pretty well, actually, I have to say.
Well, we roll from this into their challenge on the moon, which ultimately it's one of those things that when I reread, that I'm so excited for it to start, and it's so small in retrospect compared to how it looms in my memory. The characters are taken out very easily. None of them really do anything very remarkable or memorable, with the exception of Wolverine crashing into the Watcher's house for a moment, and the Watcher taking him on a journey through time before being like, "Get out of my house, you smelly little man." But basically, the Shi'ar Guard outflanks them in every possible way, which isn't a shock because they acknowledge up front, like, this group of people is so much more powerful. And to me, it kind of shows the progression we've been on, where first it was kind of all of them throwing themselves at Juggernaut, and then they like squared off against the Shi'ar Guard and like just barely edged it out. And we've had a couple of more of these confrontations, with where they're kind of one-to-one man defense on people. We had it in Alpha Flight and they kind of just squeak it out barely. We had it in the Hellfire Club and it takes them kind of into the second round. So I think this is consistent with what we've read so far, that the X-Men, they're superheroes, but they're not always winners, especially against a group this powerful and this well coordinated. So it's not like it's disappointing, but it's always much smaller than I thought it was going to be.
So to me, it did feel disappointing because I thought that after all of this is where they will shine.
You thought they'd put up a little bit of a fight?
Yeah, because we had all these trials and all these times that practices and danger room and stuff. Come on, let's make it here. But yeah, but then also there's I'm kind of like following Storm everywhere, where she's doing and what she is up to. This is like another time there was a whip used against her. I was like,
and like 3 issues.
Yeah.
3 issues. There's another time there was a whip used in it, and then this is probably the 4th time I saw her being held by her hair. As someone with a long hair, and that isn't such a gender thing, because that's one of the reasons, again, I think we talked about it before, like in the Black Panther movie, how the Dora Milaje throw their hair wig at the thing, because it is actually a very gendered thing to use.
And there are men in comics with long hair, and very rarely do you see that pose. Never is it Hercules or Superman with a mullet being held by the hair on a cover.
It's never the men being held by it's always the women. And then I think there was like someone, other places where it's like someone actually, Batwoman does that, where she's like, she uses her hair, so people try to grab her hair, but it's like actually a wig.
Yeah.
So I was like, once again, it's the hair, and then it's her, and then there's the whip. I was like, please, this has been just 3 issues. Oh, I know it's 3 months for the live reader, but for me, I was like, once again.
Tyler, what do you think about the quick succession in which the X-Men are eliminated here?
I mean, the fact that they are the underdog here, fighting a hopeless fight, makes me root for them a lot more. And I think that might be the intention here, of them being taken out like so quickly. And and of course, like, I mean, I think Byrne has an influence. It's like, no, Wolverine will not be taken out that easily. So we have to do something about that first before, at least they put up a pretty reasonable fight, and recognize that he's being fooled. But I mean, I mean, when I read through this, I was like, oh my god, they're losing. What's gonna happen? The first time when I read it, and
the thing that always occurs to me though, after reflecting on all of those things, and especially when I read this to my daughter, I mean, I remember I was like crying by the end. It gets heavy, but the thing that I always think about as the X-Men quickly get defeated, which she was like 5 or 6 at the time, it's like, oh, they're all getting defeated. And I realized that their struggle was really the moral struggle. Like Claremont already had them defeat what they needed to defeat to get involved in the battle. The battle is just for show. The struggle here was, who are they? Are they superheroes? Are they police officers? Are they a family? And they had to decide that. What happens to them on the moon is kind of immaterial. Like, could he have let one of them win the fight to wind up with Cyclops and Jean at the end before being reawakened? Sure, it wouldn't have changed things too much, other than he wanted to give Cyclops and Jean a moment. But I truly think that the struggle here is their internal struggle, and the battle is just window dressing for people who want to see people punch each other. That's what I've ultimately decided about this issue. What do you think about that? No, they're nodding, listeners.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it does make sense, but the thing is, like, when you're reading it in sequentially, as I am doing, it is like, oh, again.
Yeah.
Like, so I think that just kind of takes it off. So I wish that we kind of saw them winning before, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if we had seen them winning before, then this would have made more like emotional impact for me. But the thing is, like, the way I was looking at it, I'm like, yeah, sure, they have to be defeated because the story needs them to be, rather than whether they should have been, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they did kind of win against the Hellfire's Club the second round, and they did definitely win against Alpha Flight.
But after second trial, always,
Yeah. And,
you know what I mean?
And in a lot of the situations they've been in since they've gotten Jean back from at the beginning of Proteus, is like Jean is the deciding factor. And Claremont and Byrne's whole point here is that, like, Jean as the Phoenix is like a Thor level combatant on like a Fantastic Four level team. And of course, Phoenix shift the scale. So it's almost, and even they had Phoenix the first time they faced off against the Guard being a full Phoenix. So it's kind of like necessary from a plot standpoint for them to be like, with normal Jean, they don't have the juice to pull this off, even though they're, quite well-trained heroes.
Yeah.
Which rolls us into kind of the
that's one of the reasons.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that I wish that in the Hellfire, they took them down first.
Even it would have made this more affecting, more emotional.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, like, I wish like there was something. But anyway, sorry for interrupting.
Well, we roll from here into the second half, which basically Cyclops and Jean get cornered. They have this really nice moment where Jean like raises some dust to give them a moment of privacy. And they're like, we're going to go out fighting, which is like very much that cover comes from that. But then it seems as though they've been taken. But then the Phoenix kicks in, because no matter what controls Xavier puts on it, no matter how much Jean doesn't want to access it, it's not going to let her go down easily in a fight. It's not going to let her just die. And so then the Phoenix becomes reactivated. And so then it becomes everybody versus the Phoenix. And here the Shi'ar Guard kind of just recedes, because now we get the truly emotional moment of the X-Men deciding if on this third go round, now fighting the Dark Phoenix, and she's not even dark yet, she's still in the green.
Yeah.
If they truly can kill their friend. And we have, of all people, Colossus really debating this, which certainly his experience with Proteus weighs heavily, since he, the most emotional, loving, youngest one, was previously used as their murder weapon. And here Wolverine's willing to do it again in low gravity by tossing Colossus at Jean, but at the last moment, he can't bring himself to do it. What do you think? I know you love Colossus over there, Tyler. What do you think about this moment for Colossus?
I mean, this is just him, right? Because from this point onwards, all the way until, no spoilers, but until the very first crossover of the X-Men ever, the very first one, he maintained this purity where he refused to do certain things, and definitely refusing to kill is one of the top things that he refuses to do. I think it is interesting, and I think And I think Wolverine is being a coward because he couldn't do it. So he's like, yeah, let me throw you down, and you can do the deed. But he should realize that. I mean, maybe deep down Wolverine is like, I really don't want to kill her, but I know that if I'm the one being thrown, I would. So let me try. Let me use someone who will never kill her, and throw Colossus at her. So
Freya?
I mean, yeah, until this day, I don't understand why Wolverine likes her. Like, I mean, he kind of professed her love for her. I'm like, okay, like, why? Like, I mean, I don't know. I think this is like, I'll reserve my comment until we get to the very end.
All right.
Because I have some thoughts, like, about what happens at the end. Yeah.
okay.
Well, I mean, I'll pitch it right to you in a moment. I would just say this is maybe the one time that I kind of understand how Wolverine feels about Jean. And it goes back to what he was saying in his room about her, that Jean has a duality to her, not only with the Phoenix, but in general. Like, Jean is psychic and can read everybody's minds, is so powerful as a telekinetic, but Jean kind of leads with her compassion all the time. And Wolverine, like, is attracted to that and admires that because he understands that if Jean just wanted to be a killer, she could. And this is reflected years later in the Age of Apocalypse, when Wolverine and Jean are basically a team and they're like totally ruthless. Age of Apocalypse, Jean is totally ruthless, and she's more like the other half of Wolverine. And so this is like the one issue, even though Wolverine really plays a back seat in most of this issue, that I actually kind of get it, because I think it tells me something about Jean herself that I don't think is always obvious to me as a reader, that Jean is always actively choosing compassion in the way that Wolverine is actively trying to suppress his rage. And I feel like Claremont like gets me right there for a moment, even though we know I'm usually an anti-Logan and Jean combatant. But in this moment, I kind of understand it.
And I wish that, like, what you said, like, actually makes sense completely, but I wish it wasn't a romantic undertone.
Yeah,
Like, I wish
yeah.
it was just equal seeing another equal. Like, and that the fact that they kind of make it a romantic really pisses me off, really makes it creepy, given that the age difference between these two characters is just like, ugh.
And also just like
And that's
let men and women be friends. This is definitely a thing that like it was so hard to get like a male-female friendship in the Silver and early Bronze Age in Marvel comic books, unless they were like brother and sister. Like, it really, if you think through it, like Storm's platonic love for Colossus and Nightcrawler is actually one of the really remarkable things about this run, because they are so close and it is so non-romantic. Of course, future writers ruin that by trying to make it romantic sometimes because they don't even get it. But I think that that's part of what makes Storm such a fascinating character, and Colossus too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's the reason, because I think, like, what you said actually makes sense, given that the he's kind of himself has a very dark past which hasn't come up yet, but then in all of that it kind of make like it's all written there, like, and and all of that, but then they make it like a romantic, oh, I only saw her once, and then it's like, ew, cut it out.
Well, now we have one of the most famous scenes in all of comics, where Jean backs herself into this garage full of alien machinery, and ultimately is the one who puts an end to the Phoenix. I have so many thoughts in this scene, but I've been living with them in my head for decades now. So I'd love to start with Fariha as the person who's newest to it, and then Tyler, and then I'll share my thoughts as well. What do you think about the Phoenix's epic death scene here at her own hand?
So we talked about it before. It's like trope, how trope, when it's overused, it ends up losing its meaning and just being like another edition of that trope. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, like, this kind of falls into another thing where it's like, I could not, I'm maybe because I haven't read enough comics, I could not think about a single overpowered male making that decision. I just could not. It's only, I feel like, women make this decision of committing suicide. This was a suicide. We're going to call it what it is, just to stop it. And then this is also the third time I've seen in my very limited time that I've read Jean that she quit something. The other two times we're going to talk about it later. But then this is, so I was like, really? That's it? Like, it's just going to end like this? I was very disappointed, not necessarily on Jean, but because how writers are writing. Like, I was like, okay, this is how it is. Like, because it's kind of sexy to have a beautiful woman, all powerful, but then we're just gonna make it her decision. At least, thank God, this is her decision. To like, okay, I'm just gonna quit, and you don't have to deal with it. No one has to make any decision. So I don't know. I mean, I was just kind of upset about that. I was still sad, but for different reason than maybe.
Tyler?
I mean, the difference for me is when I first read it, this is basically a love story that did not end well. And I think when I read it, I was 12 years old.
Mhm.
So I mean, there is definitely an emotional impact there that probably, given that I know what happened afterwards, doesn't hit me so hard now when second and third reread. It feels a bit different. um but at that point, I remember when I first read it, I was like, oh man, I was really sad because it's like the lovers cannot be together. And and um y- you I guess when I was younger, I so called um hold on to a more romantic notions of relationship, and that things like that makes me sad. um I mean, when Fariha mentioned about powerful women, the trope of that, I was trying to think of, like, is there a counter example of of a male character that got too powerful and then had to um kill himself. I don't quite remember if I mean, I couldn't think of one character off the top of my head. um yeah,
I don't
we
Well,
have.
either.
it exists in fiction because
Yeah,
it's a possible version of the hero's journey, right? Sometimes the hero's
yeah.
journey is kind of has the return to normalcy at the end, and sometimes it has sacrifice at the end.
Hmm.
And so there are many versions in fiction, but I think the big thing that we're stuck on here is that in comics, the big starring person, who's usually a male, sometimes sacrifices himself for the greater good, but doesn't frequently sacrifice himself because of his own power being out of control. Later, we get to see a lot of that. Up to this point, there had not been a lot of that. Like, I think if we look in more modern contexts, there's a lot of characters. I mean, Marvel just makes it basically every event. Some guy throws themselves on the sword because everything went too wrong or whatever. It's just become even more of a trope than it was. But thinking about this in terms of when I read it, which probably was in 1992, I already had knowledge of Star Wars. And when I read this, knowing that this came before Star Wars, I'm like, oh, this is like the better Darth Vader story. Not to get into too many Star Wars spoilers, but Darth Vader,
Yeah.
because he's of two minds in a way, and it takes him kind of going against the one mind to be a part of the other mind to really get to the resolution that we get to at the end of the Return of the Jedi. And here we have a much smaller story of Jean, not really doing it for anybody else. It's not because she's got a son. It's not because any of these other things. It's because Jean kind of recognizes that the dark side of her is so dangerous and so threatening that the compassionate side of her says, like, I can't allow this to exist in the universe anymore, which unfortunately is super tied up with the behind the scenes of this, because there's this question of, is it Jean? Was it meant to be Jean? Should it have been Jean? Is it now Jean in our retroactive look at continuity, which we'll get into with the Untold Story? But I was reading from the perspective of having Jean back and knowing, like, oh no, this is just one version of Jean that's going to die. It's not like the permanent Jean. And like, then even though there's these tropes, even though it's women who sacrifice themselves often, it kind of made sense to me because it was the best way to end the Phoenix plot. That, like, the part of Phoenix that is Jean would never let the Dark Phoenix do what it can do now that she's seen what it's capable of. So to me,
So why not
it's
she just run
inextricably
away?
linked with Darth Vader, because that's how I came to it as a kid. What is that, Freya?
Right. But I was just thinking that why doesn't she run away? Like, because that's how because I was thinking about it more from, I you connect Jean to Darth Vader. I connect Phoenix to Dr. Manhattan from
Ooh,
Watchmen.
well, that's another great, and again, which came after this and may have been influenced by this, but talk more about that.
Dr. Manhattan realizes how much powerful he is and his solution to that. And it also came out of, like, well, it didn't necessarily come out of compassion. It's mostly like just logic that I'm just going to separate myself
Right.
from civilization. So I was kind of thinking about like, why couldn't it be that? Why couldn't it be like, oh, I'm gonna separate myself and I'm gonna get a hold of this and then I'm gonna come back.
But the main thing here is that Jean the person knows that she can never hold back Phoenix, and when she becomes Phoenix, and then the eventual path leads to Dark Phoenix, it becomes even, it becomes even more impossible because as the Force, the Phoenix is amoral, right? It does what it have to do and just do it. It doesn't really care if she's doing good or doing bad by human, mutant, or some cosmic being standards. So I think that's where the conundrum, I think that's where the issue comes when you don't, if she doesn't die, like how are we going to resolve this thing?
That's what I just said. Just run away.
Yeah, well, look, we're going to come back to that. So we're going to talk about Phoenix, the Untold Story, which has some of the behind the scenes. But before we do, because of what Fariha brought up here, I think we should talk about the backup in classic X-Men 43. Because Fariha, and this came out in 1990, it's Claremont. And Fariha, when I read this, not knowing you were going to make that comment, because that was not in our notes for the episode, I was like, oh, here's Claremont doing a Dr. Manhattan riff with Jean. I mean, where he, and also a Sandman riff, and you are an expert on Sandman, because here's Jean as the Dark Phoenix, or just Phoenix, is seen with death as a personification, and she's really struggling with so many different things. Am I Jean? Am I dead? Am I the Phoenix? But also struggling with, hey, I thought the Phoenix was death, and having death be like, well, you're something that's a little bit more complex than something as one-sided as living or dying, because your creation or destruction, which is almost like a congruent or a perpendicular access to life and death, and it's very Dr. Manhattan. So what did you think about 43? Do you think that gave you some of that thing you were looking for?
I just want to say something. Nothing about the story, but related to the story. So when I brought the classic Omni to Claremont to sign, he actually flipped through the book and purposely came to this story. And then he told me the backstory about this whole thing, which I promptly forgotten.
What? Damn. What the hell?
because
what?
Because I can't remember. I mean, it's not the first time I met him. I think it's the second time I met him, but I'm still a little bit starstruck. So he went on and on and on about this, and for some reason I don't remember what he said about this story.
Oh my goodness.
No, this is when I read that, I'm like, Daddy Claremont wrote Red Watchman is like, I could do this better. Like, and it just, because I genuinely looked up, like, because when I was reading 137, I'm like, oh, Dr. Manhattan wouldn't have done this. And then I read 43. I'm like, hey, when did this came out? And then I looked up, I'm like, like, you're just going back and forth there. No, I mean, so not knowing what comes after, or how this kind of gets settled, I really liked that, and I really liked that thing, and that was like, for the first time I felt like this is Jean, like, there is more about Jean that we don't know yet, because I don't know yet. You guys probably do because you have read it. And then I was like, I wish there was more of her talking and walking us through what it felt to be Dark Phoenix, what it felt like to have that much power, and all of that. That is not necessarily have anything to do with stupid mastermind or her in a vacation in Greece. Like, I wish there was like a more about it. And I was like, and and it was like also that how she got into the whole mind of those broccoli people, and then all of that was very like scary, and I mean very scary and very like emotionally jarring, because she's accused of killing these people, and she was judged so quickly, and then now she gets to be just a school student in actually in the mind of one of them, which was like very, and then also death personified. I'm like, DC got it better. They got a better death than this guy.
It's
I
so
don't know if he
interesting.
comes back later.
I don't know if we see construction worker death. Usually Marvel death is also a woman, and just like DC death.
Yeah.
But you know, as you're talking, it made me spoilers for Watchmen, but it
Yeah.
really made me think about
We
how.
didn't necessarily say what.
No, but I'm about
Like
to
we said
spoil
at-
Watchmen. It's
Yeah.
now I'm going to spoil Watchmen because if you think of the end of Watchmen, it really now I kind of want to go and see if Alan Moore has ever talked about X-Men and Dark Phoenix because it kind of does mirror this, but it's that Rorschach kind of sets it up. Like Dr. Manhattan himself never is the one that commits genocide, but we're led to believe that Dr. Manhattan maybe has committed some form of genocide. Spoilers for Watchmen, I warned you. And then Rorschach, or not Rorschach, if I said, I mean the other one. What's his name? Blonde. David Bowie.
Ozymandias.
Ozymandias, thank you. I didn't mean Rorschach before.
Ozymandias.
Ozymandias. And then Ozymandias backs Dr. Manhattan into a similar situation that Jean is backed into. And the only difference is Dr. Manhattan is like, you ninny, I'm omnipotent and I'm just going to leave this game.
Exactly.
Like as somebody omnipotent, I have the ability to just say goodbye to you by Michelle Branch and I'm leaving. And that's the difference. And so it's really interesting to kind of think of whether it was or not that Moore is writing the response to Phoenix in a way in Watchmen. And then Claremont's being like, well, that's really basic because you didn't have Dr. Manhattan be anybody but himself. So then here's Claremont like responding to Moore by being like, Jean's empathetic. That's what Dr. Manhattan didn't have. And it's almost like a conversation between the two works.
Dr. Manhattan is 100% a Phoenix response.
Is he? I don't know canonically if he is.
No, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. Canonically. But the thing is,
more experts don't come for us. That is not what we're trying to do here.
No. But depending on when it came out, what tropes were available, Phoenix was the only other trope that was available that connects with a person dying, coming back from death with more power.
Well, I mean, it's a thing in Pulp Fiction, but I think in comic books, it probably was the biggest one at the time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but because if you think about comedian Rorschach, how they were like equivalent, there's like equivalency and they're just like worse version of those. So Dr. Manhattan, I don't know if there's anything else that's there that portrays that.
Tyler, Free and I have been going off for a while. What are you doing over there? What are you thinking?
I mean,
do you want to read Watchmen now?
Trying to remember what happened in that conversation with Claremont.
No, I mean, I definitely remember that he says, it's kind of like, the place between life and death, heaven and hell or something like that. But I don't want to paraphrase him because I honestly do not remember what he said. Mm-hmm. But I think he was really excited about this story. So Fariha, next time you meet him, you should bring the Omni and just like go talk. Is this a response?
If you can just guide him into it, and he'll say the same thing.
Yeah, I hope that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope that he comes to cons because he's more on the older side, so I don't know whether he is ever going to come to a con again. That's true. Because con is like a petri dish of bacteria, even before where we are now.
Yeah.
So I really think reading that story in 43 is worthwhile. I think if you go into it thinking that it's going to reveal all about Phoenix or explain the Phoenix, it's not that. It reminds me of Sandman #8. It's just a little moment of life and death. And I'm sure Free could give us a whole video essay on how it relates to Sandman, but we got to keep moving. So here's the thing. This issue, 137, came out in June of 1980, and there's a huge behind-the-scenes story in it. It is relayed via a transcript of an actual conversation in Phoenix, the Untold Story, which is the book as it was originally going to ship before Jim Shooter realized that the broccoli people had been genocided and that he needed Jean Grey to pay. So this, as the story goes, and I'll set this up a little, and then I've read it many times, so I'm of course interested to hear Fariha react, is that Shooter approved plots, but he wasn't the kind of editor who was like, you've got to show me every word of every issue. And if he had a problem with it, he would see it on press and he would come to it and be like, you could have done this a little differently, which I actually kind of like the idea of a manager being like that. Like, he's not trying to make you feel shame for doing it badly. He's like, I'd let you do the thing that you did. Next time, try a little better. Unfortunately, in this instance, he was like, the thing that you did wrong was had your one of your title characters commit genocide. And I'm not sure that you can just let her off scot-free, because Claremont Byrne originally was going to have Jean kind of psychically lobotomized, which we can see in Phoenix, the Untold Story, to have her powers removed, and then give her a much longer arc of coming to terms with what happened with Phoenix. So if this feels abrupt to you, it's because it literally was abrupt. Shooter gave them like a weekend basically to rescript it, because Byrne had 3 days to redraw it. And there's this amazing conversations with them, Terry Austin, Tom Warzakowski, and Jim Salicrup and Louise Simonson, all talking about how this went down. It's absolutely must read reading if you are a fan of this period of X-Men. But then the other thing that's not mentioned in there that I'll throw in case you two didn't know about it, was fans were really upset about this everything. They didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. They just know that they killed Jean. And this was in the same frame as, just a few months after this was released in June of 1980, John Lennon was murdered on the street in New York City. And Claremont was getting like death threats at the Marvel offices that they had to refer to the FBI about some of these developments that were happening in X-Men at this time, starting around the time of Dark Phoenix. And they were taking it very, very seriously, because it seems like something real that could really happen. So there's kind of this push and pull of internally, Jim Shooter being like, well, you can't have Hitler in your comic book, more or less. And then you have also the external, like, how dare you kill Jean response from fans, which now would just go on Twitter and tell you to kill yourself. But at the time you had to send a letter through the US Postal Service, and the FBI could get involved. So now that I've kind of framed all of that, Fariha, what is your reaction to this other version of what could have happened to Jean, and how all the men behind the scenes are pulling the strings while Louise Simonson is left in to go and mop up the mess at the end of the weekend?
So was it Louise Simonson or was it another?
No, that's Louise Simonson. Jones is her
before
name.
she got married.
Yeah.
Oh, that was before she got married.
Yeah, so that's
I'm sorry. That was critical information.
Yeah,
okay. Last name.
Because when I read that, I was like, who are you? What are you doing nowadays? So when I read that, I was like, okay, great. But in your whole universe, you also have Galactus. Let's not forget that. Galactus.
Which some of them bring up, like, hello, Galactus exists.
Planets.
Yeah.
Yeah, Galactus exists. And then you have Silver Surfer, who is also guilty, but then he gets to have penance, like he gets to repent, but then, oh, God forbid, the women done it, right? So I'm like, okay, so what was the initial one? Then when I read the Untold Story, I'm like, no, sense, blah, 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 go back, like, no. I mean, I am all about Dr. Manhattan style, banish her and then let her figure out death is the next one. But whatever was on the Untold Story, if that was what was published, I would never touch Claremont again. I would have just walked away. I'm like, you guys all suck. You guys can stay with your Claremont. I'm done. I'm not doing this. No, you can't make me. So I'm glad at least that wasn't published because ew. Ish, like, and no, like it was genuinely, literally, like, bleep, go back, like that like that meme where it says upgrade, and it's like, no, go back, like, no, yeah. So that was my reaction to it. I'm like, let's not do that, not at all.
Well, we'll come back a little bit to that conversation that they have in the back material, but let's talk a little bit about your reaction, Tyler, to the way it could have been.
I mean, it wasn't good at all. And I mean, and I think my reaction to that was there's a lack of emotion to the original story. The emotional impact is not there. So that, to me, that is like it doesn't hit as hard. That I mean, if we are going to go back and talk about the changes that Claremont made, right? I think he made a lot of changes, and the thing that I think he improved on the second take was the reflective part.
Yes,
which makes everything so more poignant and hits the character notes pretty well, as opposed to the very first one where people are just randomly thinking about different things. But then, of course, when it comes to the fight scene, Claremont, just being Claremont, has to over-explain things So I was like, he
Ugh.
can't help himself. Then, you know,
Explaining.
the original script actually, I think, is more attuned to the modern way of telling stories than his rewrite. Yeah, but
So
yeah,
you win some, you lose some,
yeah,
But I'm glad that the winning was better. No, but the thing is, here's the thing: the original story could have been actually good if it was Jean's choice. If she chose, it's like,
okay,
okay, you know what? Forget all the fight. Forget all of that. It's like there could have been just a tribunal where it's like, you're guilty. It's like, okay, I was under thing. So this is the only way. Let me do it. And then there's like a conversation with all of them. Like she's having conversation with each one of them why she's choosing, while
yeah,
others trying to dissuade her from
Yes.
making that choice.
Mhm.
And then finally it was her choice. She was done. And then Scott walking away with no. I mean, even that. I mean, but
even if
I'm
they
just
had given
saying,
us a moment of her and Lilandra, right, which was kind of
Yeah.
like missing either way. But if she had had a moment with Lilandra where she confessed to her, she said, or she gave Lilandra the idea of just like, I wish I didn't have any of this power at all, or whatever. Like if there had been like a seed that had been planted, I think then it would have come across like, oh, because it's, it's kind of interesting to see like women having power over women for a change in the comic book. Like how many times is the woman Galactus and the woman the intergalactic empress, right? So there was a chance to do something really interesting if they had had a moment, but instead it just feels like Lilandra kind of like unilaterally deciding, which feels really different. You all brought up some things that this one quote really crystallized for me in the back matter, which is Claremont says, usually every comic book is a first draft. Like you got to get it out. And you see it on the stands, and much like Jim Shooter, you criticize yourself after it's out there. Not to say that people don't rewrite and refine, but it's not like a term paper where you print it out and you're sitting making corrections. Like you can make line corrections on it, but you can't really rewrite the story unless you're like an asshole in the Image Age who's relettering a whole comic book after all the art's been put in. And so Claremont's like, I love it more, not because it's necessarily the story I wanted to tell, but because it's a second draft, and as a second draft, it's better writing. And I really, really understand that, especially somebody who's been doing a lot of videos with you, and videos are inherently a first draft. We only get to say the things once. I only get to edit it once. Then it goes out on the podcast and YouTube, and there it is. And then a week later, I'm like, oh, I probably should have taken that part out. And I think to Tyler's point, Claremont found a much deeper philosophy for them all to have. And without those moments of philosophy, which are almost entirely what's different in this issue, and Tyler and I went panel by panel, maybe we'll put it on the blog or something, but we went like word by word to see what was different. All of those moments of morality questions are gone because Shooter hadn't demanded that there be a consequence for Jean. So none of the X-Men were struggling with that because Claremont didn't think he had to address it. It goes to show you, editors can be right sometimes because the story is so much better with all of that morality in it. Plus, Claremont's ending did kind of suck.
Yeah, I'm not. Is he the one who did the whole weird thing with Captain Marvel?
No,
Jim Shooter.
Shooter is, yes.
Yeah, Shooter is. So Shooter is the one. So I have no love for him. But this is where I was like, oh, dude, you made at least one good decision in your editorial career.
Well, and also at the top
he's the
of
one
this,
who, So
no, I was just saying that he's also the one who decided a decade later to bring Jean back.
Oh, Jean comes back? You guys!
Spoiler! But so Jim Shooter, and also they talk about how Roger Stern was like on the Kill Jean crew, but Shooter is one of the credited writers to Avengers 200, which is that awful. And it only came out hilariously like a month after this. So here's Shooter being like, I know how to do things well. And then he puts out that total egregious tripe a month later to show that he really doesn't know. Claremont's definitely better at all of this than Shooter. Okay. Shooter just happened to have one good idea in this sequence of ideas. But the other thing I want to bring up,
the thing is, then Claremont was the one who had to correct that problem as well.
And Claremont was angry. Talk about death threats. Claremont was like viciously angry at what they had done, and that's where we got Avengers Annual 10. Which, if we get back together for a second season, Fariha will get to read Avengers Annual 10, and Claremont basically just screaming at Jim Shooter via Miss Marvel on the page.
Yeah.
But the final thing I'll comment that you all said that I thought was brilliant, Fariha, is the best Marvel analog to Jean is Silver Surfer. It is. Silver Surfer has the power cosmic.
Yes!
Silver Surfer dooms planets, and Silver Surfer's comeuppance, and he's certainly doomed many more millions of people, billions of people than Jean has here. And just because he's not the one who actually committed the murder, he's like accessory to manslaughter. And his punishment is, oh, you can't leave Earth's atmosphere. So in a way, you could argue that Claremont's original plan for Jean, where he's going to like lobotomize her forever, was more in line with the kind of consequences Marvel had forced writers to use at that point, because it's actually really similar to what Stan Lee had done with Silver Surfer. So I think I don't. It's been a while since that struck me, but actually, Silver Surfer is perfect, more so than Galactus even, because Silver Surfer has humanity that Galactus doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So Galactus has to do it because it's part of, like, he has to do it because or else he's going to die. So there is no other reason for, like, but the thing is, and that's why Silver Surfer is the one who can stop, like, he can stop him, but he doesn't. And that's why Silver Surfer, the character, exists. And that's why I love him so much.
But also it's like Jean as Phoenix.
Complex.
Jean as Phoenix is almost Silver Surfer and Galactus. She's got to let the Phoenix have access to her, lead her somewhere, and then the Phoenix feeds, and then Jean has to live with it. So she's kind of both.
Yeah, but do we have Jean, like, 80, like, 30 issues of Jean? We don't.
No.
So we're angry about it.
What do you think about?
Whoa. Hold on. Can you say that again? You're angry that
we want to get you on the record.
Jean series?
Yes, I'm angry because I'm going to talk about this because that's one of the things I want to talk about because I am. Anyway, we'll get there.
No, I think we might be there. The only other thing that I was going to say was this idea of like Claremont's original plan, which was to take this plot through 150, and that Jean, I mean, Free hasn't read this yet, so I don't think we can really discuss it too much, but that Jean would pretty much have the space of Kitty and 150, and Magneto would almost kill Jean, but that would have yielded a completely different history of X-Men because then Magneto would have been more of a villain and et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it's cute in theory, but I think we got the superior product. But now, I mean, we've been all this time, I started in Giant Size telling Fariha how much I love Jean. So I really want to hear where Fariha has gotten to with Jean at this point, because this is one of the main points we did this read. We were seeing Jean in Hawksbox, and Fariha was like, Jean is boring. And Tyler and I were like, no, Jean is great. So here we are at the end of 137, and I want to hear everything you have to say.
So the thing is, like, I have always said it. It's like, it's not never the character which is boring. It's the writers,
right.
And one of the things I am actually like so mad about, even after reading this, it's like, I don't know what Jean is because she's beautiful, she's very powerful, and she loves Scott. And this is like 3 times I've seen her quit something, and this is where I'm giving ample warning about Hawksbox and the current status quo. So please stop listening if you're not caught up. So I have seen her quit the council. I've seen her quit X-Force. I have now seen her quit life. And that's all of this. I don't know what she wants. I haven't seen her first person reaction to this. And that's one of the reasons I want there to be a Jean Grey series. Stop Wolverine. Don't care. A Jean Grey series where she talks about why she makes the decisions she makes, where she's coming from, how it changed her. And also the fact that I am so mad that for 18, 20 years, she was not even there as a character. Like, talk about time debt inversion, or talk about time debt being owned. We talked about it before. She's one character who really desperately needs it because everyone else went further, but then she was just in limbo for so long. And as a modern reader who started with New X-Men, I have no connection to her. I have no connection to what she has gone through, what she is capable of, other than that really great Teen Jean series, which she was very scared about what she's going to become. It's like, she's going to become a boring person. But that's not the problem. It's not her fault. It's just the way that she's like, she's just taken out. Like, why? Why? And that's why I'm just saying that we need now more than ever. Forget the Moira. We can have that later. Let's just have a Jean Grey series written by N. Nocenti. Why not? Why not? I'm just saying, I really need that, because I want to know that why she would be the one not, that some of the decisions she have made, it's like, it comes off petty. It comes off like she's just quitting. But maybe not. Maybe that's not the reason. Maybe there's other reasons for that. I have no connection about that. And even here, it's like, okay, I needed to see what she was feeling like and everything. As of right now, like I said, her 4 characteristics are: she's beautiful, she's powerful, she quits, and she loves Scott. And Scott's thing is he's handsome, he loves Jean. That's it.
And
Among
Nano,
others. Yeah.
and Wolverine.
No,
And Maggie.
those comes later. Those
And
comes
Colleen Wing
later.
occasionally.
Those comes
Yeah.
later. But
Yeah. And Colin
like,
Wing.
And Lee Forrester.
it's like, okay, so
And you still have Colin Wing's key.
Oh yeah, okay.
I
So
just want to
like,
see
he's
Colin Wing's key
handsome,
in the
he's
moon
the
somewhere. I just
commander
need to
in
see it.
war, and
Mm.
he loves like lady. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in this case, when you're talking about her quitting life, yeah,
I mean, you know what I mean. But I
no, I know
what
what you mean, but I mean, is the story leading up to this point? I think there is no good way to resolve it, and especially not the original way. I think we have established that. Yeah, we have already established that, right? So I think this turned out for the best, even though the whole thing was a big mess.
Mhm.
I mean, I know we are not supposed to address the spoilers part, but I thought those 2 other time that you mentioned, I thought that was actually really well written, especially the reason why she quit X-Force. I mean, that.
But that's the thing. Maybe to you, but because
Mhm.
I don't have any other Jean connection to
Yeah.
me, I'm like, okay, girl, how many times are
Okay.
you gonna quit? Like,
Got
you
it.
know,
Mhm.
because and then this is like 2 things she quit in a moment,
Yeah.
in a matter of like,
Yeah.
so
In a
that's
short
what
span of time.
yeah,
Yeah.
short span of time. So then I'm like, so what is it? What is it
But
you want? And is it because that Cyclops is not on the
No,
council?
no,
Is
but
that
to
what it
your point, right? I think it's also fair to say that like Jean was dead for a long time.
Yeah.
Twice.
Why? Why is she the character that is getting the brunt of this? Like, it's because unimaginative writers who don't know what to do with her? Is that
Well,
why?
Yeah, I
Or
mean,
or Emma's doing it?
I have so many feelings to share about this, and I don't dispute
Yeah.
anything Freya says. I think the main thing it makes me really think about is, I've talked about how I've always identified more with women characters in comics. I've always identified more with a Jean or a Dazzler than any man on the X-Men. All of my favorite X-Men are X-women, as the saying goes. And I think that for a long time, even somewhat to today, maybe it's changed a little bit in the last 5 or 10 years, that being a fan of a female character in comic books is the practice of having faith, because you always have to imagine some part of their story that nobody's going to give you, especially when they were all written by men, no matter how well-meaning the men were, no matter how much consultation the men got. I think of all of my favorite female characters, even Wonder Woman, and it's kind of like the process of recognizing their potential and then waiting for somebody to give you the moment that you know they can have. And I think Jean brings that into such sharp focus, because they literally killed her as soon as you could have maybe started getting moments with Jean that you could have had. And then you later, Morrison, whatever their intentions, basically the gist of what you get from Morrison is almost them saying like, well, Emma's the more interesting version. Jean is almost like an outdated model. We can tell these stories better now with Emma than we can with Jean. So let's take Jean off the board again. And so I think she's one of my favorite characters, but I feel like I've been waiting since I started reading comics in 1991 for 30 years now to finally get some good Jean stories. And this is why I get so violently reactive when it's like Jean's in the mini dress again, because the best time of her life was wearing the mini dress. I'm like, can somebody please just imagine something new for Jean that's the next step? And I think the closest we have ever gotten, other than that Jean Grey series by Hopeless, is actually X-Men Red, which Free and I don't like. And we have very valid reasons for not liking it. But X-Men Red is one of the only times that any writer has said, let's see what happens when Jean starts something instead of when Jean leaves something. So much about Jean is the aftermath of Jean making an exit, making because she's the only one with the heart to do it. But then let's see what happens to that person with heart when they start something. So I really feel like I've had a true come to Jesus, we'll say come to Claremont moment on this program, because Fariha has really made me like internalize and accept why I love Jean and why I'm always dissatisfied with Jean. And I kind of see it through your eyes. Like, I'm so happy we did this read because I think I've always known all these things to be true and I've never been able to put my arms around it. And now I don't just see it for Jean. I see like my inherent disappointment for all of these women that I love. Rachel Summers, Dazzler, The Invisible Woman, and like how hungry I am to just read good stories that are good representation with them and the few times that it's right. And like, that's why, just like you, I love Kamala Khan. I love, you know, because she feels like a female character that's been fully realized from the first day. And it's something that we so rarely get. But you're, you know, speak from your own experience. This is me saying what I'm seeing it as somebody who's not in the body of a woman living the life experience of a woman. Does that resonate with you at all?
No, I mean it does. Like, you know, when you said about like the women, female characters not getting enough stories and stuff like that, and that's one of the reasons that I feel like post 2000, especially in Marvel, it was actually done better for the women characters. You know, and that's one of the reasons not having Jean there, we never actually get to do anything interesting with her other than X-Men Red. But we all know that was also because X-Men was dwindling down and they were trying to like slash them. There was all these other things going on. We didn't get that. But the thing is, like, for example, all the other ladies have come so far. Like, you know, like Emma comes so far, Mystique, Rogue, even Dazzler in the
Kate Pride, Jubilee,
Kate Pride,
everybody.
Everybody got to come come so far, and then she was left behind, and then it's because she was taken out of story twice, and that is and I desperately want her to be so far away from Scott Summer and Logan Howlett. Like, I just want her to be far away from them. There is like, so even if you want them in their story, tell me why she's playing house with these characters in the same location where the worst thing that could happen to her happened. It was in the moon, and she's now playing house with them in the moon. She's playing mother to the characters she doesn't necessarily have as much time with. Scott had more times with them.
Yeah.
How does she feel about Logan's children? Because Logan has a bunch of children. Why is Scout not with them? She's the one who's supposed to be so compassionate. Why she hasn't made asked Scout, hey, come and have dinner with us in the moon. Like, so I want those things to be answered. I want to see it from her point of view. I want issues that are written from her point of view.
Yes.
And I want to understand what about, like, you know, why is she still the face of X-Men? Why is she the face of X-Men? We can talk. She is still the face of X-Men.
Yeah, very much so. Starting in June.
Yeah, so why? But why? Given that there's other better model. I'm just using the term.
I'm not trying to make up excuses, but I feel like a lot of Jean's story centers around Phoenix. They cannot separate Jean from Phoenix for some reason. Like, I mean, just look at every time she comes back, it has to do with Phoenix. It has to deal with Phoenix. So finally, I believe in House Parks, she's like totally divorced from Phoenix. And hopefully Dugan can do something with her. Or like you said, let's champion for a Jean solo series.
Yes.
She can do whatever she wants to do. And let's delve deeper into her.
And one of the things I think the 1991 Blue and Gold status quo did well for many years is that they put Jean and Cyclops on separate teams. That was really one of the smartest things that ever has been done with Jean, because it just let her have space to react without going, Scott, Jean, which you have to do so many times when you read this issue aloud to a child. Let me tell you, you yell Scott and Jean a lot. So I think that, I'm just so happy to be at this point because I feel like we've actually come to this common ground on her. Like, I've definitely shifted in my appreciation and what I want for her. And I feel like Fariha has had the chance to come along on that journey, and it's really fascinating. But since this is our season 1 finale for our Epic X-Men reread, and much like Marvel's Epic collections, I'm not saying we're necessarily coming back to read 138. We might come back and start from some other place, some other series. I don't know yet. We're taking a little X-Men breather after this on this show, not on This Week in X, just so we can all regenerate and resurrect our love for X-Men. But Fariha, like, what do you come away from this thinking? Like, do you want to just, are you hungry to, I know you have that omnibus. Do you just want to read 138 and plunge forward? Are you rolling your eyes? Like, where has this left you as our first time reader?
Given that the Untold Story is not the original story, like, thank God for that, because or else I'll be like, you guys are on your own, continue on reading.
You'll
See
have a
you
few
in
of those
Weekend
points
X.
if we continue, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So the thing, but I am actually excited to read forward because I can be like, oh my God, Reavers. or I can say that, oh my God, Nightcrawler and Crystal. I know what that is about.
Maybe you'll finally come into the Kate camp.
Oh no, I'm already on Kate camp.
Oh, okay.
Hey, yeah, we have. See, this is what I'm telling you. Kate has come so far.
She has.
This year.
You might fall out of the Kate camp briefly once you see all the stuff she does, but she was a teenager.
Oh yeah, she was a kid. I mean, I'm okay with kids growing up better, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, and then also Peter got me with the whole Mystique Destiny hook because Peter just slyly mentioned it's like, yeah, maybe Claremont actually set up Mystique, and I'm like,
yeah,
okay, fine. I'm reading, stop twisting my arms. So there's that as well. So yeah, I mean, you know, I want to know where these characters come from, even though it's like, okay, it has been a long time, and then does it matter? But it's fun, and apparently the best parts are coming up. So why should I stop now? After going through all of this.
Tyler, what about you? I've been talking episode after episode about my gradual transformation, seeing it through Fariha's eyes. But what about your transformation? Has this read been different for you than any of your past reads?
I mean, it's different in the sense that I'm a little bit more critical. When in the past, when I first reread the series again, it's really just for nostalgia. So I was like, oh, okay, just to relieve the, you know, some of the feelings when I first read it, and reminiscence the more innocent time for me. But yeah, but you know, it forces me to be more aware of certain tropes that has been in existence, like, you know, since the 80s or 70s and 80s and that kind of thing, and how far things have changed. You know, I mean, Fariha definitely has very strong point of views, and very I mean, and it's not just Fariha. I think, Peter, you also brought, like, you also enlightened me a lot about a lot of things which I in the past would have just, oh, you know, it's like that, swept it under the rug and never think about it again. But you know, I think it makes me a better critical reader of comics, and that is always a good thing, because you know, I mean, otherwise I would just be accepting of all kind of, like, you know, nonsense that is like dumped on me on a weekly basis in books that, you know, I have to spend money to buy, and I didn't even realize that they were, like, you know, dumpster stuff that people just can yeah, I mean, people just can what do you call, like, they just don't want to spend the time to write a story that that is that treats every type of characters with equal fairness, and, you know, with and respect. That's the word that I was looking for. Yeah. So
wow, that's a shocking indictment of like Wolverine series, current Wolverine series, Tyler.
So I think I have two things to close this out, and one's an echo of what Tyler just said, which is that, you know, I think that some people see people who are critical of comics, and they think critical always has to equal negative, and they're like, well, why you just want to bring your critical read, your critical sentiment into everything? Why can't you just enjoy things? And I think Tyler's issued a wonderful rebuttal to that just there, which is that reading something with critique allows you to access other levels of it. You can read the issue and like the issue. You can think the art was cool, the cool punch really made you, you know, say, wow, that was a great fight. But these are art. There are serious professionals who've trained their whole lives in some cases to put these out, and to just treat them like these disposable Kleenexes of story that we toss away. And that's true of all art, right? Like anybody writing anything for TV, for film, anybody painting a picture, making a sculpture, even, you know, journalists, magazine writers, These are people who are trying to put their best into a version of truth on the page. And we can look at that with the filter of appreciating it just for what it is, and then the appreciation for how it's built and how it's been done. And I know that's threatening some people because they didn't like English class or critical reasoning class or whatever back in school, and they don't want to use those skills that they were asked to use on The Great Gatsby again in the modern day. They want to tuck them away. But I think what all three of us are here to tell you is like, you can find so much more to love about the stories you love. The few things you find to dislike about them is going to pale in comparison to all of the depth that you get from them. So I encourage critical reading. I think we should all be critics, not critics in the sense of complaining, but critics in the sense of really saying, why do I like this art? I even do it with food that I eat. When we sit down at dinner, I say, why do we like this meal? Because I want to know why it worked. And I think that also takes a certain personality, and nobody's telling you have to read that way. But that's the way we read here on Crushing Comics. It's part of why we crush on comics, is because we want to think about all the parts, squeeze every ounce of meaning out of them. That's what Crushing Comics is. Bria's like, I'm there. I finally got it.
No, because all this time when you were saying Crushing Comics, I mean, you were crushing it
into a little compacted ball.
I realized that you were actually crushing on it.
Yes. Well, there's multiple levels. So, well, and connected to that.
Because I just learned today.
That's why it's been Crushing Crisis all these years. The tagline on my site used to be, everything I'm crushing on and everything that's crushing me. It's kind of like the things I'm in love with and the things that are making my chest feel like it's going to collapse.
I always thought it was the second one. Not the first one. Because I'm cynical. I didn't even see that. I didn't even thought about that. It could be a possibility. But
well, at the risk of defanging that excellent resolution to this whole first season, I do want to say one more thing, which is that there's no right place to start reading any right comic book. Fariha has read hundreds of issues of X-Men already and just read this. And guess what? None of this is the best of X-Men. And the thing that you think the best of X-Men is not somebody else's best of X-Men. So I'm so happy if you listen to this all with us. But if you've just been dropping in, or if you're thinking, do I have to continue with 138? Our message to you is read the comic that looks good to you. Okay, because you're going to get to read these whenever you want. It's one continuous story. It's the most fascinating, elongated, long-running version of storytelling that we have in the English language right now. And you should appreciate it at whatever point you want to dip your toe into. So whether you want to continue through to 138 without us, and we'll catch up to you when we launch a season 2 at some point, or Fariha jumped right into the 2000s with her next read after this and pretty much has read everything from 2004 to 2012. Go where it takes you. There's no right way to read X-Men. There's no must-read story for X-Men. There's only comics that you love and comics that you are crushing on. So with that said, I want to say one final time, Fariha, why do we get together and read X-Men?
Because X-Men is better when it's read together.
That's truly absolutely true. Yes. This is by far my favorite read, alongside the read that I'm doing with my daughter for very similar reasons. So I want to thank Tyler and Fariha for putting in so much time to do this reading and recording. I want to thank you for listening to it. We will be back with more Crushing Comics Book Club, not necessarily for X-Men, just following up on this. And we will be back in the future with an X-Men epic reread season 2, but you should let us know if you think we should continue with 138 or jump to somewhere else. So until we do, on the behalf of myself, of Tyler and Fariha, this has been Crushing Comics Epic X-Men Reread, and we hope that you are well.
Bye. Until next time.
Until next time.